The Hidden Magic of Flowing with Life, Alan Watts insight. Have you ever noticed how the harder you try to control life, the more it seems to slip through your fingers? Like water, the more tightly you grasp it, the less of it you actually hold. This paradox of effort and resistance sits at the very heart of one of Alan Watts' most radical and liberating insights, an insight that, if truly understood, that doesn't just change the way you think, it changes the way you live. The hidden magic of flowing with life is not just a poetic metaphor, but it's a fundamental shift in perception, a transformation in how we relate to the world, to ourselves, to control, and to meaning itself. And the moment you begin to see through the illusion of control, the moment you realize that most of your suffering comes not from life itself, but from your resistance to the way life unfolds, you begin to wake up. Not in some mystical, abstract way, but with a clarity that cuts through everything. Let's start with something that sounds almost absurd. You are not the one in control of your life. Not in the way you've been taught to believe. You don't control your thoughts. You don't control your emotions. You don't even control when you fall asleep. And yet, we build our entire identity around this illusion of control, as if we are the CEO of a company called Me, Inc., making executive decisions, charting strategic plans, and executing goals. But if you really examine your experience, you'll see that most of life happens to you. You don't breathe, you're being breathed. You don't cause your heart to beat, it beats on its own. And this is where Alan Watts drops the first bombshell. The self you think you are is a story, a role, a mask, what he called the skin-encapsulated ego. A mental fiction pretending to be the author of reality, when in truth it's just a ripple on the surface of a vast ocean.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now, this doesn't mean you're powerless. Quite the opposite. It means real power comes not from domination, but from alignment, and from learning how to dance with life instead of constantly trying to choreograph it. Watts often used the metaphor of music to explain this. You don't listen to a symphony to get to the final note. The point is not to finish it. The point is to play, to participate. And yet we treat life like it's a problem to be solved, a destination to be reached, a checklist to be completed. We miss the music because we're obsessed with the map. Here's a question that might change the way you see everything. What if nothing is really out of place? What if the chaos, the pain, the uncertainty, all the things that seem like obstacles are not interruptions of the path, but the path itself? What if flowing with life doesn't mean being passive, but being present? Responding instead of reacting, trusting instead of forcing? This is the core of what Watts meant by going with the flow. It's not some lazy surrender to fate, but it's a deep, conscious trust in the intelligence of life itself. A recognition that you are not separate from the universe, you are the universe, experiencing itself in human form. And when you start to live from that awareness, decisions become lighter, suffering softens. You stop fighting reality and begin to ride its waves, like a surfer who doesn't control the ocean, but learns to move with its rhythm. Think about how much of your daily stress comes from trying to force things, trying to make people act the way you want, trying to plan every detail, trying to guarantee outcomes in a world that promises none. What if you stopped doing that? Not entirely, not recklessly, but gently. What if you learned to act without attachment to results? To show up fully, do your best, and then let go. That's the secret magic of flowing with life. You're still in motion, still engaged, but without the weight of needing everything to go your way. And here comes the twist. The moment you let go of needing control is usually the moment you gain the most influence. Not over others, but over yourself, over your peace, over your presence. But people sense that. They're drawn to it. Because in a world of frantic striving, someone who flows stands out like a still lake in a storm. They're not detached, they're anchored. So now the deep question, are you fighting life or are you moving with it? When was the last time you truly allowed things to unfold without resistance, without needing to manipulate every outcome? The truth is, we often confuse control with strength and surrender with weakness. But what flips that on its head? Real strength is fluid. Real power is responsive. And real freedom comes not from escaping life's currents, but from learning how to float. The art of surrender, why letting go brings you closer to yourself. It's one of the most counterintuitive truths you'll ever encounter. The more you let go, the more you become yourself. Not the version of you that's been shaped by fear, pressure, or social expectations, but the deeper, freer self that exists underneath all the noise. Alan Watts didn't just teach this as a philosophical idea, he lived it. He laughed at the seriousness with which we hold on to our identities, our plans, our reputations. And he asked the radical question, what happens if you stop trying to control every detail of your life and instead surrender to it? Surrender. That word scares people. It sounds like defeat, like giving up. But Watts clarified something essential. Surrender is not resignation, it's participation. It's not about becoming passive. It's not about letting life steamroll you. It's about recognizing that there is a vast intelligence in the fabric of existence, a symphony of movement and change, and that your real task isn't to conduct the orchestra, it's to learn how to dance to the music. The irony? The more you try to dominate life, the more life resists you. But the moment you let go, truly let go, you begin to move with life. And that movement has a strange, effortless beauty to it. We've been conditioned to believe that everything valuable in life must be earned through struggle and strain. That if we're not fighting, we're not growing. But Watts turned that on its head. He asked, what if growth is not something you achieve, but something that happens when you stop resisting what is? Think about a tree. It doesn't force itself to grow. It doesn't wake up anxious about how tall it will be next month. It simply aligns with the sun, drinks in the water, and allows life to flow through it. And in doing so, it becomes exactly what it was meant to be. So ask yourself, what are you gripping so tightly that it's actually holding you back? Is it an idea of who you're supposed to be? A relationship you're afraid to lose? A plan that no longer fits, but you're too afraid to release? Surrender is not about losing those things, it's about letting go of your attachment to them. When you stop clinging, you make space. And in that space, something new can emerge, something more honest, more aligned, more alive. Watts often reminded us that we are not separate from the flow of life, we are that flow. The sense of being a separate self who is navigating the world is just an illusion created by thought. And when you take that personally, when you believe you are the thinker, the controller, the doer, you suffer. You try to control the river instead of realizing you are the river. You try to push against the current instead of learning to float. But when you let go of the illusion of the separate self, you don't disappear. You expand. You become more fluid, more responsive, more open to what life is offering in every single moment. Surrender is radical because it asks you to trust the very thing you've been taught to fear, uncertainty. And yet, uncertainty is where life happens. It's where growth lives. It's where creativity is born. When you try to remove all uncertainty from your life, you're not protecting yourself, you're imprisoning yourself in repetition. But when you surrender to the unknown, you become available to the present in a way that's almost magical. You start to notice things you never saw before. You see beauty in chaos, patterns in randomness. And most importantly, you begin to feel yourself not the version of you that's performing, but the one that's simply being. So here's the deeper question. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to be in control and started being in contact? Not with your plans, but with reality itself. How much of your energy is spent resisting, managing, calculating when you could be experiencing? Surrender doesn't mean you float aimlessly. It means you move with the flow of life, not against it. It means you trust that who you are is not something you have to invent, it's something you allow to unfold. The illusion of the separate self, why you're not who you think you are. One of the most mind-shattering realizations Alan Watts ever presented is this: the self you believe yourself to be, the thinker behind the thoughts, the doer behind the actions, the observer behind the eyes, is a mental construct, a useful fiction, a story that consciousness tells itself. And the more tightly you hold onto this illusion of a separate self, the more disconnected you feel, not just from the world, but from your own life. It's like living in a house of mirrors, mistaking the reflections for something solid. We say I think, I feel, I want, but who is the I doing all of this? Can you find it? Can you point to it? Or is it just a narrative center, a grammatical convenience around which experience revolves? Watts didn't say this to erase your identity or to make you feel insignificant, but on the contrary, he said it to wake you up to something far more profound. You are not a stranger in this universe. You are the universe, happening in the form of a person. Just like a wave is not separate from the ocean, you are not separate from the totality of existence. The wave rises, moves, crashes, and disappears, but it was always ocean. It never stopped being ocean. And when you realize that you, too, are a wave in the cosmic sea, something shifts. You stop feeling like an isolated ego trapped in a bag of skin, and you start experiencing yourself as a process, a movement, a verb rather than a noun. This illusion of separateness is the root of so much fear, anxiety, and tension. We feel we must protect the self, defend it, build it up, prove its worth, and ensure its survival. But when you begin to see through the illusion, you realize there is nothing to protect, nothing to defend. Because the self is not a thing, it's a function. It's a role that arises and dissolves moment by moment, like a character in a play. And when the actor forgets he's playing a role, he suffers. But when he remembers, he can dance with the part, improvise with life, and play fully without fear. So think about this. Who would you be without the constant need to define yourself? Without the relentless inner commentary that says, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I need to become. What if you let go of all that just for a moment and allowed yourself to simply exist without judgment, without narrative, without goals, you'd still be here, you'd still feel, you'd still move and breathe and think, but there would be a lightness to it, a freedom, because you'd no longer be carrying the burden of believing you are something separate from the world around you. This is not about erasing your personality or abandoning your responsibilities. It's about seeing through the illusion so you can participate in life more fully. When you stop identifying with the ego, you don't become less, you become everything. You stop being confined to your thoughts and start becoming the space in which thoughts arise. You stop being the wave afraid of crashing and start realizing you've always been the ocean. So ask yourself, what if the self you're protecting is just a mask? What if your true nature is not a fixed identity, but a fluid presence? Can you live from that place, not just in theory, but in every breath, every step, every smile? When you do, life stops being something that happens to you. It becomes something that flows through you. In Dancing with the Tail, How to Live Effortlessly in a Chaotic World. So here we are, at the edge of perhaps the most beautiful and terrifying realization: life is not something to be controlled, solved, or conquered. It's something to be danced with. In the language of the tale, which Alan Watts so often wove into his teachings, this dance is the ultimate secret that Tao is not a god or a doctrine. It is the way things move, the current beneath all things, in the pulse of existence itself. And the more you try to go against it, the more exhausted, anxious, and disoriented you become. But the moment you soften, the moment you yield, you begin to move with it. And it feels like coming home. But we live in a world obsessed with doing, with fixing, improving, achieving. We're told that life is a ladder to climb, a problem to solve, a mountain to conquer. But Watts invites us to see it differently, not as a task, but as a play, not a war, but a dance. And in a dance, the point is not to arrive at a specific place on the floor, it's to move effortlessly, to feel the rhythm, to be completely immersed in the moment. That's what it means to live with the Tao, not to escape chaos, but to find stillness within it, not to eliminate uncertainty, but to embrace it as the very space where creativity and joy are born. This doesn't mean we stop acting, stop dreaming, or stop engaging with the world. It means we act without the tight grip of control. We dream without the fear of failure. We engage without the need to dominate. You begin to see that life is not a straight line from A to B, it's more like a spiral, always moving, always unfolding, always inviting you to return to the present. And when you stop resisting that spiral, you begin to float. You begin to dance. Watts would often laugh at the seriousness with which we treat our lives. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared enough to see the cosmic joke. We spend so much of our time trying to become something, to prove something, to get somewhere, when all along we've never left. You are already it. You are already the Tao, the flow, the miracle you've been chasing. The only thing in the way is the belief that something is missing. So here's the final question. Can you live today, not tomorrow, as if nothing is wrong with you? As if you don't need to be fixed, saved, or improved? Can you move through this moment like a dancer, not a soldier? Can you let go not of effort, but of strain? Because that's the hidden magic of flowing with life. It's not about giving up. It's about showing up fully, honestly, freely. When you live like that, even the chaos becomes choreography. Even the unknown begins to sing. And you finally remember what it feels like to be alive, not as a separate thing in the universe, but as the universe itself, dancing.